net, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hands up if they can be seen on screen, or use the raise hand button function? Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and to grab the attention of the Chair or Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the Chair or Democratic Officer know. If they have a webcam, then they should try turning this off, as this will help with broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so they can at least hear and be heard. So thank you all very much. We must all know that off by heart now, so we'll continue. Welcome to the Healthy Living and Social Care Scrutiny Committee, Tuesday, the 11th of July, 2023 at 5 p.m. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
None from myself, Chair.
Anybody else? I can't see any hands raised. No.
I think Councillor Buckley might have sent his apologies.
Councillor Buckley?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Chair, I'll note that.
Thank you. Agenda item 2 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of June 2023. Would you like me to go through by page, or would you like me to move on block? Is everybody happy? Okay, and I'll second that. Thank you, Neil. Agenda item 3 is to receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interests, including whipping declarations under the Council's Code of Conduct. Does anybody have any whipping declarations? No, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 4, which is the reports of the Director of Social Services. Gemma is going to take us through this. Gemma?
Hello, good evening. Thank you for having me. So in terms of the revenue position, the accounts were, the draft accounts were completed as at the 30th of June, and they're now with the external auditors, so the audit has commenced, and they're working to a timeline of completing the audit in November. So that will be taking place over the summer. So a challenging year. There are a number of emergent pressures. We did report throughout the year a potential pressure around the additional pay award that was awarded, but this was in the main mitigated across the council through vacant posts. Specific to this committee, we do have pressures that were reported in children's services, so we have some market force pressure and also some pressures around legal costs. We also have pressures against the community care finance budget, so against the domiciliary care and residential care payments. But this does include an additional payment that was agreed and backdated towards the end of the financial year. And then within leisure, we did have an overspend there, and that relates in part to the ongoing impact of COVID and the reduction in footfall, and that arrangement finished in December of 2022. And then beyond that, there were some additional costs incurred around the additional energy pressures that the leisure service was experiencing. And within social services, we also had a specific factor that has distorted the outturn position to a certain extent, and this is the significant adjustment, so over £4 million adjustment that was made for deferred income. And you may remember that that was made following a recommendation from Audit Wales that we recognise that income when it becomes when it's matched to the service being incurred rather than when we're able to collect that income. So that's often arrangements that are linked to a person's property, for instance. So obviously that was a significant adjustment that distorted the outturn position in social services. Of that adjustment, £2 million was transferred into social services reserve, and the balance some of which was used to offset pressures within social services, but it also has contributed to the overall council surplus that's set out within the report of 1.89 million. And there are a number of one-off schemes that are illustrated within the report that are then funded as part of this surplus. So it includes funding for additional learning needs within mainstream schools, some one-off funding for schools in special measures, and a number of schemes, including some funding for some patching and micro asphalt works as well. Those were the I was just going to pick up about reserves as well. So as you'll recall, in preparation for the 23-24 budget, we did take quite a significant amount of reallocation of reserves across the council, and that's illustrated as a reserves table towards the end of the report. Despite taking quite a significant sum out of the social services reserves to enable us to build up some of those energy and pay pressures pots corporately, we are left with a balance of just over 10 million within social services, which will be utilised to fund the social services budget programme, and also be utilised to guard against some of that volatility that we see in social services budgets. Those were the key points I was going to pick up on the report, but happy to take any questions on it.
You're on mute, I'm afraid, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing out the key points, but this report is to inform committee of the outturn and the financial measures taken and proposed, and to note the allocation of 22-23 surplus to support the delivery of schemes supporting key priorities identified by the council. And the recommendation is that we just note the report, and the allocation of overall council surplus just be noted. But does anybody have any questions? No? No questions? So Neil. Thank you.
I waited because it's not so much a question. Firstly, thanks, Gemma. It must have been a nightmare pulling all this together for the and the next one for the council. It is informative. It does tell us what's happening with the cash, and basically, I'm just moving that we know.
Thank you, Neil. Do we have a seconder? Christine. Thank you, Christine. Right, so in that case, we can move on to agenda item 5, which is Gemma as well. Can you go through any of the major points again, please, Gemma?
Yep. Absolutely, thank you, Chair. So I think overall at a council level, relatively low net slippage, which is, an improved position from previous years, but this does mask some additional schemes that were added to the programme, some budget that's been brought forward and some that's been slipped forward. And there is some adjustment to schemes, which is outlined in Appendix 3 of the report. We have tried to, I think, as you see probably in the monitoring reports throughout the year, just highlight some of the achievements within the capital programme in year. So there is some detail around the Carries Close scheme that's taken place within social services. In terms of the adjusted approved social services, there was adjusted budget of 1.1 million, spend of 767,000, and slippage of 331,000. Most significantly on a few schemes, T Derry Sant Plant Room, IT development. There was some slippage on the ICF dementia friendly scheme, but that's to deliver an expanded scheme, and also some slippage on the sluice room scheme. Within leisure, again, schemes, relatively low levels of slippage, but there obviously had been some slippage that took place earlier in the year. I suppose the most notable slippage there is on the Bellevue scheme of 160k, but I understand that scheme has now been completed. Again, happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Gemma, for going through that once more for us. Does anybody have any questions? There again, then the recommendations are: 1, that the committee note the year-end capital position for financial year 22-23. Are we happy to note?
Yeah, move we know. Again, it's a complicated report. I mean, across this directorate, we know that our finances and our spend are volatile depending on what cases we've got, what provision we need to be making, particularly for care for children and so on, especially if you're having to go out of county for some of the more specialist provision. And it's difficult to predict and it's difficult to work around. And I commend Gemma and her team. Thank you very much. Move we note.
Thank you. Councillor Christine Cave.
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Christine. And recommendation 2, that committee note the additional scheme budgets are set out in Appendix 1. And recommendation 3, that the committee notes the summary position of the changes in the capital programme by directorate from approval at council on the 7th of March 2022 to the 31st of March 2023. And 4, that the committee note the emergency power approved in respect of the slippage as set out in Appendix 3. Are we happy to move all those recommendations? Thank you, Neil. Christine, are you seconding?
Yes, Chair, I am.
Thank you.
I'm afraid you're muted, Chair.
I must stop doing that tonight. Yeah, this is an every year report. Anything that we raise now will be going to Cabinet. So if you find anything in there you'd like to bring up, please do. And then we will have questions. I don't know who's doing this one. Agenda item 6, is that you, Lance?
Yes, it's
For your sins.
Yes, it's me, and I may take a little bit of time if that's okay. So this
Yeah,
is
sure.
the partly, I suppose, because it replaced a number of previous committee reports that used to come. There was one that that we described all of our service user consultation. There was also one that went through our compliments and complaints, and they're embedded as part of the director's report. So it made sense, rather than do it twice, that it all comes in this main report. So the version of the report that is attached at the appendix is a challenge version. So essentially it gets released today, and we share it with partners and so on, and ask for feedback. And obviously Scrutiny Committee is a vital part of that feedback. So I'm looking for any comments or suggestions that you may have. Slightly different from some of the other reports, this is the director's report, so it isn't a council policy, although I do like to try and make sure that the priorities that I'll go through at the very end are kind of signed off by Cabinet, so that we understand and are in agreement with those. So I suppose just in terms of the background to this report, it's a requirement of Welsh Government, statutory requirement that we do it. The format is set out and laid out by them, so I have very limited scope to deviate from that. However, you hopefully will notice we have tried to put some pictures so that people can genuinely see the kind of services that we have available and some of the people who are enjoying them as well. I think, in terms of the audience of this report, it is a public report, but I think, so it tries to engage with our users, our staff, obviously members, and also Care Inspectorate Wales, who I think use it significantly to guide their inspection programme. I think it covers the last financial year, and so you'll see that it links to the objectives that we set out in the corporate plan. And I think, as I said before, it's not council policy, but it does reflect, I think, the views of myself and managers in social services who've helped put it together. I think it's also worth noting, in case this comes up through a different mechanism, but the council is required to complete a corporate self-assessment as well, and so this report essentially forms part of that wider self-assessment. I think, you know, as I said, it will go out to consultation now. So service users and carers haven't had an opportunity as yet, although they will hopefully to comment on it. So I am expecting comments back through that. The final report will be presented to Cabinet for approval of those priority objectives in September, and then it will be made available via the Council's website. So I think I'll probably get into the report now if that's okay, but I think just before I do, I suppose I just wanted to highlight that the requirements for this report are contained in a number of different bits of legislation and codes, and so we're required to report on 6 quality standards or wellbeing outcomes, as they're referred to in here. So there's a big section on each of those and the priorities that we set last year. So I suppose I won't go through the forward of the report because I think I probably just essentially summarised that, but I will start with the performance, and I think, you know, we continue to collect a wide variety of performance measures that will have been reported to this committee in various formats over the last 12 months and our progress against them. You're also aware, I think it was last committee or perhaps the one before, where we reported on the performance evaluation inspection that was completed by the Care Inspector at Wales, and I think, you know, we rely heavily on that external assessment, which, you know, at the time very much reflected some of those difficulties that we had in terms of finding sufficiency of domiciliary care, but was overwhelmingly positive. I think we've, as you also know from last meeting, we have made significant inroads into that area in particular. And I suppose just to highlight some of the kind of broader performance figures, over the last year, we've seen a 7% increase in the number of new assessments for adults, and that's led to an 8% increase in the number of adults altogether with care and support plans. Many of which, or significantly bigger proportion, actually have those care and support plans delivered through direct payments, which gives them greater opportunities to have control directly over their care arrangements. Similarly, we've seen an increase in the number of children with a care and support plan as well. So what I suppose I would summarise by that is we have seen a significant increase in demand and a significant increase in overall service delivery over the last 12 months. I think, you know, you'll see in the report that I referred to the COVID-19 pandemic. I know for many people it's considered to be over, but you will be aware that, you know, we continue to deliver PPE, and by significant amounts. I think, you know, it's over 6 million items altogether over the last year. It's certainly not gone away for us. And you'll see similarly a high number of tests distributed to the social care workforce during the year. There's well, I like to think it's a nice photo. It's in the DOC office after we received the award from Care Forum Wales about the COVID Heroes Gold Award for Best Local Authority Supporting Care Homes. I know I mentioned it last committee, but I thought it was helpful to have a photo here, so I won't go into that again. I think, you know, in order to be balanced, I think it's important that I raise the challenges that we've experienced as well. And I think, you know, the service challenges have primarily been around, as I've said, that increased level of demand. I think if I look at children's services, we've got some difficulties also in terms of recruitment and retention of particular staff and availability of certain types of placement. So that, coupled with that increase in demand, can create some significant challenges for us. Similarly with adults, I think, you know, I've already mentioned the domiciliary care, but I should add at this point that the Vale Glamorgan Council has a very high proportion of its social services clients supported at home when I compare it to other local authorities in Wales, and also probably a correspondingly slightly lower number of those supported in more institutional environments such as care homes, which actually fits very neatly with the express strategic direction that we've been setting out over a long number of years. So I'm really pleased that that is borne out in the actual evidence and figures that are within this report. Recruitment and retention isn't just an issue in terms of qualified social workers, it is in carer roles as well. And again, I'm at risk of repeating what I've said over previous committees, but I think you would think it was wrong if I didn't mention them within this report. So in terms of how we shape our services, as I said earlier, we rely very heavily on our service user consultation. And service user consultation takes many forms. And I think, with each individual care package that we arrange and in each individual intervention that we do, we should be taking clearly on board either the views of the child or the adult who we're working with. But in addition to that, we do specific consultation exercises, and you'll see in adults that we have completed those in our community resource service, our adult placement service, which is very similar to a fostering arrangement, but for adults, across our day services and through our alcohol and drug team. And we use those consultations to help inform and drive our service priorities. So what we get a lot of reassurance from when we do those consultations is a kind of information you'll see in here that often talks about people feeling that, for example, in the consultation finding for the BCRS, that care workers and the service, that our residents find them very reliable and that they were respectful to them, and so on. And you'll see also that we have areas for action under each of these, where we recognise through those consultations that there are areas for improvement as well. And so we use those to make sure at a team level that we're responding to what those bring up. I'm not going to go through each of those because it would take too long, and it's a substantial part of the report, but you'll see that it goes through each of those areas that I just described. I think it's also, I suppose I will mention the carers services, because that's something that this committee was previously very interested in. You'll know that we developed a carers charter, and the areas for action in here very much are about the kind of aspirational content that we have within that charter, and a need to link some of those improvements in communication and explanation of the services that we're able to offer. In children and young people services, we explored the views and experiences of children and young people in relation to our placements team, the Flying Start service, child health and disability, and leaving care. And again, very positive responses in terms of people feeling that they've been supported through changes and so on. And our foster carers themselves feeling very satisfied with the communication that they received. And I think, again, I suppose, we don't rest on our laurels. There's areas for improvement, and you'll see under each of those areas some areas for action, as well as the positive highlights that those individuals reported back to us. I don't want to leave resource management and safeguarding out, so I think it's important to notice that the residential care service, where obviously we support a number of residents across our 4 residential homes, both through long-term living arrangements and through respite, that we have sought the views of relatives and residents and our staff. And again, I think some further areas for action. So I suppose that's it in terms of our service area or team area specific consultations, but we also get feedback through compliments and complaints. And I think if I go through this section, it's really pleasing to see that we had over 100 compliments, which is good to see, and I think we've got better and better at capturing those. I think within the after the numbers, it does point out some of the individual areas and comments that have come through as well. So we also, I suppose, the opposite of complaints, compliments is complaints, and we have detail here of the 51 complaints that we received. We have something that we call inquiries, and that's a kind of almost a pre-complaint stage. So when somebody contacts us and they may have perhaps a concern about something, we try not to ramp that up into a complaints process. We just want to respond and deal with the issues that they're raising. And so there were 47 of those. Whenever I present the figures on complaints and inquiries, it's important to note that some of these figures are counted twice. So if somebody makes a complaint at stage 1 and they're unhappy and it goes to stage 2, that will be counted twice in terms of the numbers. Again, I suppose we look for themes, and we look for themes within the different arenas of our service in order to try and respond and learn lessons. And I think you know hopefully you'll see, I think it's page 28 in the notes, the lessons learned, and I suppose these you know there is some familiarity with these in terms of the need for communication and to keep people up to date with the processes that we're involved in. So as I said earlier, the report requires us to report under 6 wellbeing standard and 6 standards, and the first one is there in terms of working with people to define and co-produce personal wellbeing outcomes. And last year we had identified a number of priorities under those, and again it will be work that you're familiar with, so I will probably go over these quite quickly, but it was to continue with your choice. So that's the model where people have much greater levels of control over their domiciliary care. To continue to implement the strengths-based approach in children and young people services. Again, hopefully you're seeing a theme here that recognises that the people that we serve need to have higher levels of control and autonomy over the services that they receive. And then wellbeing standard 2, which is working with people and partners to protect and promote physical, mental and emotional well-being. There's a priority there about the Vale Integrated Falls service. So that's a new service that I think we reported here that came online through our telecare service. And it's great to see the progress that's made. So they've responded to 500 falls since the inception of that service in March 23. So, you know, it's serving a lot of people in a very short time. And then we also have the work of the alliance model. That's the processes that we have set up in place to try and bring our services together in a more integrated way with our health board colleagues. And then wellbeing standard 3 is about taking steps to protect and safeguard people from abuse and neglect or harm. And we've been working very much on embedding the new escalating concerns procedures. That was our priority last year. So that's where we particularly respond where we may have a number of issues with a particular provider, and we want to respond in a coherent and strategic way, as well as managing the operational impact of those issues that are raised. Similarly, I think, you know, whilst the Youth Offending Service usually reports to another committee, it is managed within social services, and the work of the Youth Offending Service is very allied to the plans that we have within social services. And I think it's important that this committee note that we had an inspection a further while back that rated that service as good and gave us some challenges, I think, in terms of how we can make it even better. So again, that was a priority to us, and there's a little leaflet showing some of the really positive work that the Youth Offending Service has done in terms of repatriation work. So that's where our young people are making a positive contribution in their communities to repair the harm that has been caused. And then moving on to wellbeing standard 4, which is about encouraging and supporting people to learn and develop and participate in our society. We had a priority there in terms of enhancing the information on DEWIS, and there are links within the report. So if anybody wants to go and have a look at DEWIS, I would strongly recommend they do, particularly if you're looking for anything in your locality where where you might want to know about third sector services that are on offer. So we often, as well as having detail of our own services, it has detail of the offers that are available from third sector and allied services, which can often be a really good place to direct people initially when they may have queries or want support. I think then in terms of priority 8, we had a review of elements of children and young people services paperwork. This was our priority before, trying to make it accessible and child friendly. And again, you see a number of bits of ongoing work in terms of updating how we work and building on and making a reality, I think, that strengths-based approach I described earlier. And then in Wellbeing Standard 5, which is about supporting people to develop, to safely develop and maintain healthy domestic, family and personal relationships, we had a priority about the strategy for unpaid carers, which I've mentioned already, so I won't repeat, but work also with Foster Care Wales to increase the number and diversity of foster carers in the Vale of Glamorgan. And you'll see progress there, despite what I said earlier, in terms of there being still a significant gap in terms of overall demand. Wellbeing Standard 6 is about working with and supporting people to achieve greater economic well-being, have a social life and live in suitable accommodation that meets their needs. And I think, you know, the first one I would bring out there is the smart house, and you saw a little photograph of it earlier. And I understand, I think within this report there was also a link to a video that describes and shows really nicely the impact of how an individual is able to use Alexa and so on to command the features that are within the house, such as opening the blinds, turning the TV off, setting alarms and so on, to support their daily tasks. And so that's the end of the 6 wellbeing outcomes. But I think, you know, I mentioned it earlier, the director's report also focuses on workforce development. And, you know, we have done a number of things over the last year. We've supported that restructure in children and young people services, and done some quite innovative attempts to try and deal with that recruitment challenge that we have with regard to social workers. So we've had a real commitment to growing our own in terms of social workers, but also, I suppose, managed to find a number of overseas staff who've come to join us through an international social work recruitment program, which has helped. It has to be said, but I would be lying if I said that challenge has gone away. In terms of resource management and safeguarding, we have developed with the council's OD team, organisational development team, a fast track to care recruitment programme, which essentially offers anyone who might be interested in working in care an opportunity to get into the industry really quickly, and also I think probably a really helpful way of giving them a little insight into the role, that if it's not suitable for them, they can find that out really quickly as well. I think in terms of the priority in adult services, we continue to have challenges with regard to approved mental health practitioners. So these are the individuals and the sole individuals who can do approved mental health work, which is essentially assessing for admission to hospital under the Mental Health Act. But we have a very bespoke programme of retention and succession planning for them as well. So in terms of going forward, we clearly need to embed that structure in children's services. We have amplified our training programme to give more staff the opportunity to undertake training to prepare them to become social workers. That's happening as you know, 23-24 has already started, so it's already commenced. And I think also, you know, we're not sitting on our laurels, and again in terms of that domiciliary care position, we know it's improved, but we recognise that it remains fragile. Hospital discharge is always a challenge. It's a particular I suppose challenge for our health colleagues, and we need to make sure that our service there, albeit small, is resilient to sickness or annual leave requirements. And so again, we're making that larger to make sure that that is more resilient. I'm not going to go over the financial resources because I think it's been perfectly timed this evening. You've had a report from Gemma that's gone through our finances in a greater level of detail. But if you do want to see overall figures of where our money is spent, you can see that on the diagram there on page 46. And I think you'll have also seen over the last 12 months some of the partnership working we do, not just corporately, but also with our regional colleagues. And you've had reports from Captain and our cabinet member describing some of the products of those regional arrangements and some of the benefits that has brought about. And I think just to end, there's also a bit towards the end of the report that kind of update some of the progress we've made in terms of promoting the Welsh language and access to services in Welsh. And I'm really pleased to see that we have more staff now who would describe themselves as fluent, so able to complete and write an assessment in Welsh, and they're across our services. So again, I think that's really positive. So the report, I think, represents a number of challenges. I think it also shows really good progress over the 12 months in that context. And at page 51, we have identified where we think as a senior management team our challenges remain and need to be worked through. So there are I think 14 priority areas under the 6 wellbeing challenges that are born out really from the experience of the last 12 months, and you recognise areas that were brought up through the performance evaluation inspection from CIW as well. So areas that we felt particularly that we need to make sure we respond to. The director's report doesn't sit in isolation, and so at the very end it describes some of the further information and key documents that form part of that wider assessment. So thank you for bearing with me whilst I took you through that. I know I don't normally talk very long when I go through reports, but I did feel because it covered a wide area of social services, it was right to do that this evening. But obviously I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have, as are my colleagues should we need to get into detail. I don't have. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Lance. It's a very detailed and informative report, and I can see that we do have challenges left, and I feel that you're doing your very best to try and tackle these. The reasons for our recommendations on this report is to provide us members with an opportunity to contribute to the challenge process for the director's annual report. So this is your opportunity. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Lance on the report? No, there you go, Lance. It speaks for itself. Well done. No, we have Councillor Neil Thomas.
Yeah, you knew it'd be me. I did pause to wait to see if anybody else put their hand up. Can I let Marianne go first?
Sure, Marianne.
I'm afraid you're on mute, Marianne.
Got my camera on and turned my didn't put my speaker on. So thank you, Lance. I don't envy the position social care is in at the moment, but I just wanted to ask about children that were visited on the Child Protection Register in the last year's time frame. Are you in a position to make an assessment of if the statutory time frames will be met during this year?
I mean, Rachel may want to come in and add a bit more detail to that, but I think, it's a performance indicator that I report on within the report. It doesn't show 100%. I don't see 100% across Wales in terms of those visits being made. I think we would recognise that we would rather it was a better than it is currently, and that's why it's recognised within the report and highlighted as one of the areas that we want to improve upon. But Rachel, I don't know whether you want to add any further detail to that.
So, sorry, Rachel, just what I was really meaning, I think, is do you monitor it throughout the year? You know, so 3 monthly or something like that?
So visits to children on the register are monitored through the Child Protection Conference process individually for each child or sibling group, and then generally as a performance indicator. So we would expect Child Protection Conference chairs to be picking it up in a timely way in relation to individual children or families. And I mean, Ian is here in respect of having oversight of our safeguarding team, but that is the process that we undertake, and then it's about monitoring it on a more of an overview basis. It isn't 100%. I mean, it's, should we have any level of tolerance within it? Possibly not, but there will always be situations where you find that potentially you can't get into the home for whatever reason, so your timescale is missed. It is an important area of practice, isn't it? I think the only other thing to say, Councillor, is that a child protection plan is bigger than children's services in isolation. So we're operating as part of a multi-agency group, and what we should be assuring ourselves of through the core group, which is the multi-agency group that overviews the child protection plan, is that we are collectively meeting our responsibilities, sharing risks, identifying concerns, strengths as well as vulnerabilities, in order that we can continue to safeguard those children. So I guess it's a longer answer than yes or no, but I'm hoping that provides some assurance of what we do, both for individual children and families, but on a more generalised basis as well.
Well, it kind of does and it doesn't, actually, Rachel, because I appreciate what you're saying, that the Vale of Glamorgan Council may have met more targets than other authorities, and that's what to be welcomed, obviously. But looking at last year, that 32% of children weren't visited on time, but you've highlighted something important there, and I don't know if this is possible, that those visits, because there's a difference between not having enough staff to complete those visits and actually trying to complete those visits and being thwarted by other situations, like families not answering the door. And I don't know if that information is collated, but whatever the Vale are doing now, I would be hoping that next year that percentage goes up. You know, we're not talking about 100%, but we are talking about children on a child protection register.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, as can be the case, isn't it, with questions that are raised in committee, we'll provide a level of answer. Hopefully that answer is sufficient on the night, but it may need us going away and having some further look and analysis of the question that's being posed. And I think I can just see Ian's come on, and I think the answer will be that we are happy to do that, if that would assist both yourself and the wider committee.
Well, I think, I mean, I don't want to be asking for things. What I'm saying is, so two things. First of all, if you're monitoring it regularly, then you know by the first quarter of the year whether things were worse than last year. I'm hoping that things are moving in a generally positive direction. But then there is that other point that you raised and I've just picked up on, whether or not there's any room in that to say why, not just to the councillors, but to yourselves. There is a reason for this, and if the reason is you haven't got enough staff, then that needs to be looked at in a different way than if the reason is that you're being thwarted for other reasons.
Thank you, Marianne. It's a good question, and it was a question I was going to ask, because I wondered how often these checks were actually done, because as these children are at risk, if you miss a visit because you can't get an answer, then something very serious could happen to that child. So did you want to come in, Ian?
Yeah, Councillor Charles, I was just going to come in relation to the performance piece. I think it's really important to set that out, as Lance and Rachel have identified. This is a really important performance indicator for us, and one where we'd want performance to be better. But it's also, as Rachel set out, there can be a variety of reasons why we don't hit hit a target of 100% in this area. One of the key pieces of work that we're looking at this year is the development of the performance management framework. I think there's a recognition within the directorate that we need to get better at providing social workers, managers, operational managers, heads of service with performance information at the right times, and this is a significant piece of work that business intelligence and performance are focusing on this year, and we will have a framework that we're developing and will be in place later on in the year. So that will enable officers to have much more real-time information in terms of key performance indicators such as visits to children on the Child Protection Register.
Marianne, did you want to come back in?
Not on that point, but I've got another question, if I may, Chair.
Yes, go ahead,
But
Marianne.
I don't know if there's anyone else who wants to add anything on that point before we move off.
No, nobody else got a hand up except Neil. Neil, do you want Marianne to continue? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Lance. You mentioned about complaints, and I just noticed, and I'm sure everyone else did, that most of the complaints seem to be in children and young services. And I wondered if there was anything particular you were going to do to kind of try and address that.
I'm sure Rachel will want to come in, but I think.
Rachel,
Just before she does, I think that there is something inherent in the work with children's services that means that we're far more likely to have complaints than the work with adults. So predominantly the work with adults is where people are seeking help and want support, and we then provide it, and so usually the complaints are around a delay in that, or it not being available exactly as they want. With children's services, the statutory nature of the work, the child protection elements of the work, mean that we're far more likely to end up in the kind of territory where people aren't happy with the sorts of complaints. But I don't know, Rachel, whether there's something you wanted to add to that. But
it's exactly as you describe, Lance. I know that those were the observations that I would have made. It is the nature of the work. It's not unusual, and I think there's something, isn't there, as well, about encouraging a space where individuals are able to have a voice in relation to the experiences that they've had, we get a variety of complaints across the cohort of users that we're involved with. What we're always trying to do is identify the themes within those complaints. So sometimes you'll get a number of complaints that occur within a particular area or a particular time. We get complaints which sometimes we have to defer and say, actually, your situation is before the court, and therefore the court process, the care proceedings take precedence. But we're also really wanting to work with families. Complaints has a negative connotation, yes, but it's an opportunity, isn't it, through which somebody has a voice in order to express a feeling about a service they've received. So as well as obviously wanting to have as low a number of complaints as possible, it's also something that as a service, I think we encourage to understand how people are experiencing the service and what we can do to improve. But it's not unusual, because of the way that we intervene with families, which is different to adult services, that we have a higher number of complaints. I'm also there are a lot more compliments as well that come across my desk in its broadest sense than ever before as well, and we're always really keen to make sure that they're recognised within the service. And I'm really pleased when those opportunities to acknowledge the really good work that staff are doing are provided to me.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Chair.
you. Yeah, it was a very informative and detailed report, and thank you, Lance, for all that information. Neil, did you want to come in?
Yes, please, Chair. Firstly, my professional life, I can back up what Rachel was saying about the nature of work with children and families is more legislatively driven, and therefore more you're dealing with unhappy people in unhappy situations, and unhappy people are often looking for excuses sometimes and reasons for what's gone on, and very often the nature of the work is such that they will complain, whereas working with other clients, they're more, it's more a cooperative thing, and therefore happier. Having said that, thank you, Lance and Rachel, for your reports. I have a couple of questions. One is in relation to COVID. You raised it, Lance, and staff sickness. It is a fact that our team work with in more face-to-face situation than many across the council, and therefore protection from COVID, it is still ongoing. It's going to be ongoing forever, and or for at least a long time, and it's something we're going to have to deal with. How is it impacting staff sickness, and therefore impacting the amount of work we can do? And the other concern I had within the report is the 8% children who are moved more than 3 times or more in a year. And you've heard me bang on about this in previous committees, and it's something that we are aware that moving is disruptive and everything that implies, and it's you recognise it, and I urge you to bring that down. We heard last night from Tom Bowering that the Vale is regarded as being one of the best, or being the best performing council in Wales at the moment. Those of us who were in the meeting last evening, and this report certainly supports that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I suppose I'll deal with the sickness, and I'll ask Rachel to respond then to the other issue you raised. COVID sickness is an issue. You probably pick up in through your friends and family and so on, that it seems to go through runs, doesn't it? There's lots of it around for a few months, and then it seems to disappear again. But I suppose the isolation times and so on, they've all been reduced. It's easier to manage than it once was. Interestingly, the most significant area of sickness in social services, and I think this is actually replicated across the council, is actually home related stress, so not work related stress. And I don't know to what extent that is linked to the aftermath of the pandemic or to other issues. Certainly the individual stories that I'm aware of with staff are often really tragic. The circumstances that individuals are going through that mean they can't be in work. I don't think anyone would expect anybody to be in work in those circumstances. So it is an issue, and I don't know why it is much higher than it has been previously, but it does seem to be a factor. Work-related stress, on the other hand, has been more manageable. It's not gone away. It still remains an issue, but certainly if I go back several years, I think it would have been the biggest issue. So something has changed, and I can't be sure why that is, but certainly I don't think, in answer to your question, the COVID-19 in itself is a much smaller issue than the others. But I'll hand over to Rachel now in terms of the number of placement moves.
Thank you. In terms of number of placement moves, Councillor, I mean, it's been a real priority for us, and it's actually an area in which we've done well in providing as much stability as is possible for children. We anticipated that we would see some rise in that figure as we got into a more challenging placement context. But maintaining a figure under 9% has been very good. Now I've quickly worked out a percentage against a rough CLA number that for last year, and that's 26 children, is it, who have moved more than 3 times. We do a lot in order to support stability. We aren't always able to place children for the first time in a placement that will see them through whatever assessment or involvement that we have, and children will experience moves. And I think what our responsibility then is to look at the quality of those moves. So, you know, can they be as planned as possible? Can we think about introductions? Is there any opportunity for respite in advance? But I mean, I'd be lying if I said to you that we, given the context in which we're working in relation to, you know, placement of availability and the national context, those things aren't easy. And in that context, that percentage, although it isn't as low as we would want it to be, is a reasonable position to be in.
I can appreciate that in the first, given, let's say, an emergency admission, then they're placed rapidly overnight because it's a matter of finding a bed and then look at where the most appropriate place is in terms of the young person's needs and characteristics, and then move on to that, and that the short-term fostering, short-term placement is just that. It is a quick, often a quick placement, and then moved on. It's just, I mean, as you say, 26 kids. The less the better, obviously, and it's that period between placement and final placement that it sounds. I mean, it's the. I guess I was more concerned about the or more part of it rather than the three.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd want to reassure you that you know, placing as well as we can the first time is really important to us. Making planned moves is obviously the second important thing where you can't maintain that. I mean, the reality is that as you get to know children better, their needs change. You know, lots of things can mean that you need to look at something different. You might have had to separate siblings, and then there's an opportunity to bring them back together. You know, that performance indicator is just asking, isn't it? Placement moves outside of school moves, if you like. But there are a number of other legitimate reasons, as well as non-legitimate ones, where there's a need to move. And I wouldn't want that for my child. You wouldn't want that for your children, or the important children in our lives. So, you know, it is a priority for us, and we're not sitting on our laurels. We're continuing to maintain that priority. But I think there's a responsibility for me to further reinforce that we are in a really challenging placement context, and I can't suddenly make that better. But what I can do is expect that we continue to work in a as child-centered a way as possible. So, you know, planned moves, introductions, considerations, matching thoughts, etc., so that we do the best possible job that we can within that context.
Yeah, thank you for that. As is so often, the narrative behind a statistic can inform far better than the statistic itself. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. There's a very interesting programme on BBC One at 9 o'clock tonight, which I think the whole of Great Britain should watch, and we may get some more fosterers through it. Any other questions before I move on to the recommendations? No. We have 3 recommendations: that Scrutiny Committee consider the content of this report, that we consider the improvement priorities for social services as set out in the Director's annual report for 2022 to 2023, the challenge version. And again, recommendation 3 contributes proposals for any changes to the Director's annual report as part of the challenge process. I think as a committee we have covered that. And it was quite easy with the informative and detailed report, as I've said. So does anybody like to move the recommendations? All of them, Neil?
If I may, Chair, sorry to interrupt. Just for clarity, for the sake of the minutes, with regards to your last recommendation there, obviously it's asking for proposals. The comments this evening, nobody's formally proposed any changes to the report itself. It's mainly been observations. So can I just clarify, are we making any formal proposals, or are we happy just to place our comments this evening? I just need to be clear what we're suggesting for the minutes.
I didn't pick up anybody proposing anything. So if we just want to note what the people have said, I'm sure everybody will be happy with that. Councillor Christine Cave.
I think Christine was
yes,
seconding.
Okay. I was just seconding what Neil was going to say. I just preempted where we were going there. Sorry.
Thank you.
I was going to move the report. Maybe we can commend the report to Cabinet.
Yes,
if that's all right with you, Christine.
Yes, absolutely.
There we go.
Okay, so in terms of the third recommendation that's before you then, sorry, let me just put that up on screen. So in terms of the wording for the third recommendation, that we would be saying that so recommendation 3 is currently that the proposals be used to update the director's annual report as part of the challenge process. But as a committee, you're agreeing to change that recommendation to say that the committee endorses the report as presented this evening. Yes, I see a thumbs up from Councillor Thomas and seconded by Councillor Cave. I'll take, if that's okay.
Yes, yeah, that's good. And three was the contributes proposals for any changes to the director's annual report as part of the challenge process. I don't think we've made any changes. I didn't pick up that.
No, that's correct, Chair. So that last recommendation will be changed to say that the committee endorses the report as presented. But obviously the points that have been raised in the debate today will be picked up in the body of the minutes anyway. But we're just changing that third recommendation.
Yeah, I think it's important that they are added into the into the report, but not as. So thank you for that, Amy. Thank you for picking up those points. So that will move us on to agenda item 7, which is the annual delivery plan monitoring report, the Q4 performance. Lance, can you introduce the report, please?
Yes, and I'm going to be very quick. I'm conscious I did a lot of talking at the last report, and these reports have coincided this evening. But I suppose this report, represents our progress against a number of service plan actions that we set out. I think overall the performance is very good. There are actions within the report that you'll see that we haven't yet completed. I think sometimes the actions don't neatly fit with a April to March planning process, and sometimes things get away with us from us because they prove to be difficult. So where that happens, we review them and essentially put them forward into the following year's plan to make sure that we pick them up, assuming that they're still relevant and the right thing to do. So I would be happy to answer any questions that come out of the rest of the report rather than me go through it. It's 183 pages, so I don't think you want me to talk through them.
No, I think that it clearly demonstrates that the progress that is being made towards achieving your commitments. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to debate? No. So we have 2 recommendations. Recommendation 1 is that members consider question Q4 performance results and progress towards achieving the annual delivery plan 22-23 commitments as aligned to our corporate plan wellbeing objectives within the remit of the committee. So happy with that? Yeah.
Yeah, I concur with everything you said. It is an excellent report that's showing progress, and weaknesses are identified, and remedial work is there, or remedial intentions are there in place for us to support. So I'd move the recommendations.
Okay. And Christine is seconding.
Yes, I second those comments.
Thank you, Christine. And I think that we've also ensured that council is effectively assessing its performance. So that takes to recommendation 2, that members consider the remedial actions to be taken to address areas of underperformance and to tackle the key challenges identified within the remit of the committee, with the views and recommendations referred thereafter to Cabinet for their consideration and approval. Thank you, Neil. Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Christine. Well, thank you all very much. I don't have anything urgent and no part 2. Thank you all very much for attending the meeting. I found the agenda this evening very, very interesting. And can you tell us, please, Amy, when the next meeting is?
Yes, Chair, the next meeting is the 12th of September.
12th of September in the diaries, and see you all then. Have a lovely summer break in August if I don't speak to you before then. Goodbye and God bless to you all. Take care.
Yeah,
Thank
take
you,
care,
Chair.
everyone. Good summer.
Bye.
Thank you.